Hello guys, today I have opportunity to do a comparison between two most common pressure transducers used in the automotive industry, the WPS 500 from Pico and FLUKE PV350. Now before I do this, I want to show you guys the reason I got these sensors, transducers. For the longest time I was using these cheap aftermarket pressure transducers, and they worked just fine for me. I didn't need anything better. For what I can benefits from these sensors and doing the in-cylinder pressure transducer testing, this was just fine for me. Until one day the waveform got kind of goofed off, and I'll show you what happened to it. So I decided to kind of look for a used one on eBay, so I end up with these two transducers. Now when I generally don't use these transducers for anything other than in-cylinder pressure testing. When it comes to a fuel pressure testing, I'm just using the cheap 100 psi pressure transducers. I don't feel comfortable exposing these sensors to a fluid. I know they are made for that, for fuel and all that, but I just don't like it. But 100 psi pressure transducers just work just fine for that. And when it comes to a like exhaust or intake pulses, I like to use a first look sensor. It gives me a lot better waveform, and it's a lot easier to use it. Now, let me for the this type of a transducer, got to have a 5 volt supply, made one, and so I'm just gonna plug it in and hook it up to my cylinder. I'm gonna plug it into my scope, and then I'll show you the problem that I have this sensor. Now, I know many of you actually experienced frustration where the waveform just not usable, and I know many of you think it's a scope like 8-bit versus 12-bit scope. Unfortunately, it's a transducer itself, because these pressure transducers are, when you look at from outside, you can't tell any difference, but they are just not. Some of them are not fast enough to produce a usable signal, and I said I had this one for a good 7-8 years, and it was fine until just recently starts to having problems with it. So let me set up my scope, and then we look at the waveform. Okay, so I'm just going to use channel A, and plug in my unit, turn it on, and let's set the scope and start the engine. Okay, so now I did make a video how to customize these transducers, so let's just go down to a menu and go to a my 500, no, I have to go, I'm sorry, 300 psi. Okay, so this is pretty much the zero line. It works off the 5 volts, and where 0.5 volts is actually 0 psi, and 4.5 volts in this case will be 300 psi. Okay, so alright, so here's the problem that I have on this transducer. And again, I never had this issue before. It was working fine for me. Now you can see here that this is my zero line, and as soon as I start the engine, the whole trace actually dips below zero line. And I'm not sure why it's doing that. And so that's now the waveform itself. It's great. I mean, I can filter it a little bit more, and for what I need, you know, it's just fine. I don't need anything better than this. I can get my cursors. I can you know, it would work fine. You know, if we, and it used to. I can get my rulers. Mark my 720 degrees, and then you know, if I want to check my my timing and everything, you know, the exhaust, the intake, and all that. However, the problem is, here's my zero line, and the whole trace is actually measures like 77 psi, but it's more than that, because it's like let's see what we can do here. Maybe it's like 4.5 psi below zero line, it needs to be. So anyhow, this was just driving me crazy. So again, I still don't understand what the deal is. It was working fine, and until one day it just this happened, and you can see clearly that the whole trace is just dips below. See that the slopes down, and you know, if you wanna check a exhaust, plugged up exhaust through your cylinder, I can't do it anymore, because it's just not relevant. I mean, the data, it's not right. So anyhow, that's the reason why I got these other transducers. And so let's do a comparison between PV350 and Pico. Okay, on a Pico scope, it's a pretty simple. You just turn the unit on. It will do automatically. Will do calibration. And now we're going to be on setting number 1. That's up to 500 psi. And simply, I just have a adapter here for Pico on the side. So I'm going to plug it in. So we're just going to look at the same cylinder, so we can get a comparison between two units. And I'm going to plug in the cord, cable, and my Pico is going to be on the channel number 2. Now Pico has an option, you can actually zoom in your waveform, which is kind of useful. But okay. Now your FLUKE transducer, it's kind of unique. It actually has a very nice feature where you can actually, the unit itself can measure kilopascals, psi, or inches of mercury, and centimeters per mercury, or something like that. So this is a Euro version. So anyhow, what's nice about it is that when you turn the unit on, you have this button here. It's English or metric. So for us in US, we're just going to use a PSI. But what it does, it does a conversion for you. So when you look at your waveform, 1 millivolt is going to be 1 PSI. And so it is very nice if you don't have a picoscope. If you can't, honestly, you don't need to do a like a custom probe or something like that. It's simply just looking at the millivolts. You do automatic conversion to pressure, to PSI, and the same with the kilopascals. You know, when you set the range for kilopascals, 1 millivolt is going to be 1 kilopascal. So it's very nice. It's same thing with the inches of water. 1 millivolt is going to be 1 inch of water. So you can really actually measure vacuum or negative or positive pressure pretty easy on any scope. So it's a very nice feature on this FLUKE. Now on the Pico scope, on the WPS 500, it's kind of similar, but it's actually times 10. So 10 millivolts is equal to 1 psi. That's it, on the setting number 1. Okay, so on this one, we need to put a, for my scope, I have to put a adapter for the BNC, because this is a banana adapter. So this is the positive, this is the negative side. So now, this does not have, it will not calibrate automatically. I set, here is your zero dial, to zero it down, but I think once I set it where it needs to be, it pretty much stays there. So it's not, that's not an issue at all. And so now I'm gonna plug into my scope, and then we'll set the waveform. I did customize my probe for the FLUKE on my Pico. I'll show you guys that pretty much you just go to a custom probe and put times 1000, because that's going to give you 1 volt, and they'll work. Again, you don't have to because simply 1 millivolt will be 1 psi or 1 kilopascal, whichever setting you choose to use. And so I'm going to just plug it in. I'm going to connect the same cylinder. And I'm going to turn the unit on to I'm going to leave it on a PSI on English and plug to the scope, and then see what we got. Okay, the blue trace is FLUKE, red trace is Pico, and right off the bat we can see here that we don't have that problem as I have it on my aftermarket transducer. My zero line stays right where it needs to be. I'll put my cursors here and here, and you can see they're nice and even. Now also here we can see that, let's go to the next frame and zoom in more. Okay, as I said, the 1 millivolt is 1 psi, so let's set the cursor there. We're going to have a 53.8, so that would be 53.8 psi, and let's go to a Pico side, and we have a 53.17 psi. So pretty close. Let's just measure a negative pressure all the way down. We are minus 9.7, and on the FLUKE 10.4. A little bit. That's close enough. The 10, 9.7, so that's dead on. Now, as you can see here, I need to change my scale because I'm on a voltage. If I do but we can see that they are pretty much mimic each other. So let's just change my scale on a FLUKE to 100 millivolts. And hopefully that will give us a better range on both signals. Okay, that should be better. Yes, because the reason I had this happen, because basically the Pico, it's 10 times 10 millivolts. Basically, it's 1 psi, and vice versa. On FLUKE is 1 millivolt is 1 psi. Now we have actually absolutely the same waveform. Now we can actually do a comparison, and we can see that FLUKE is really. Let's just do again 52. 52.2, 52.6, almost the same. And so I was kind of worried about FLUKE because it kind of works off the lower range. Just like 1 millivolt is going to give you the measure up to 500 psi, so it's got only a half a volt, but it works fine. And let's place this here, 9.7, 9.4. That's pretty good. So. So let's put these on top of each other. Zoom in a little bit more. And very nice waveforms. I mean, now I can filter just a little bit more on my FLUKE, but quality of a signal, it's pretty much the same as a Pico. It really is. I mean, I don't see any problems at all. So again, now I'm gonna I'm gonna actually use my, so it's kind of like deceiving when you're looking at this, that's a 53, 52 psi on the blue channel and 50. Again, I mean, this is really close. I mean, it's just fine. 52.6, 52.2. I mean, pretty much dead on the money. I mean, if you want to be, I mean, they are very, very precise instruments. So you can. This is great. In a way, this FLUKE actually has an even nicer waveform now than Pico. But okay, so let's go ahead and change now to a my formula basically. Here's my FLUKE 500 psi. I'm going to go to 200 and let's do a Alright, and now you can see when I use my formula, I'm going to apply just a little bit of a filter. It's too much, of course. And, I mean, it's super nice. And we can see they are all dead on the money, both of the waveforms. And again, I mean, my biggest fear was, is it the quality of the waveform there? You know, is it Pico? You know, so much better than FLUKE, and you know, it's really not. It's pretty much almost the same quality. Now, I haven't tried this on the Varus or any other scopes. How, you know, I can apply a better filter with my Pico scope, of course. Now I know at Varus you can change the filter as well, but I'm just doing this on a Pico scope. Maybe I'll do on a Varus if you guys want me to. I can do a next video on a Varus to see how we can compare these two. But for a you know, Pico users, you know, this pressure transducer, it does the work. I mean, there's no question. And so that was just wanted to show you guys how you know, the quality of the waveform and you know, how precise both of these pressure transducers are. Can we trust, you know? And you can see 53.5, 52.9. I mean, it's just you know, just right on the money there. So, and let's go to negative pressure, minus 10.3. Minus 9.4. That's close enough. And okay, well, I hope you guys enjoy this presentation. And the Pico transducers has the rechargeable battery. It's charged through a mini USB port. FLUKE works off the 9-volt battery. You have to take it apart in the back. It's kind of process to do it. It's not too bad. Just gotta be careful. Something else on the FLUKE, to test your battery, you need to plug in your multimeter, and with the unit off you should read over 100 millivolts. That's going to be indication that the battery is good. If your voltage reading is below 100 millivolts, you need to replace the battery simply by unscrew this little screw, take the cover off, expose the battery, take it out, put another one in, and that's it. And I mean, this is it. I got nothing else to add to it. This is the reason why I have you know, but I bought these transducers, because my aftermarket, I don't know what happened to it, and I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this Pico. This is so much more expensive than FLUKE. FLUKE does just fine. Again, for my instead of pressure for my intake or exhaust, I do use my first FLUKE sensors. I just don't want these sensors to be exposed to exhaust or fuel or something like that. But I think I'm gonna keep FLUKE for sure. I got this one used on eBay. I paid $150 for this one. Again, they are used at up to $250 and new up to $500. But the cheaper option for someone who doesn't want to spend that so much money on the Pico, this unit works just fine. And that's it. Well, that's it. Okay, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.